Hello everyone and welcome back to Nicktoons Unite. There are pants running around in Jimmy's bedroom, which is a reference to When Pants Attack, which I think is the very first Jimmy Neutron episode. And we're finally in Retroville. I've been waiting for Retroville. I love Nicktoons games with Retroville levels in them. In this Retroville level, the idea is to run around Jimmy's house collecting what look like computer chips. This isn't a perfectly faithful recreation of Jimmy's house or anything, but it is pretty nice. They put a lot of effort into it. They very easily could have gone very low effort with this and left it sparsely decorated. But they even put a piano in here. It's a shame that the secret portal in Jimmy's fireplace is not active, but this game probably had some pretty serious budget constraints. At any rate, the computer chips are very easy to find. You just go in every room of the house and they're lying in plain sight. Well, sometimes you need to break boxes to get them, but other than that, they're lying in plain sight. We actually have to make good use of the strafing mechanic right here to take out these turrets, because they fire as soon as they see us. So yeah, strafing around corners is something you do in this video game during the third-person shooting. And I mean, it only lasts for this one section, but it's still pretty cute. I approve. This is the only room in the house where it may be even a little bit difficult to find the computer chips because some of them are hidden in boxes. And I actually forgot to break open one of the boxes and get the computer chip at the start of the room. But we're going back to get it now. So yeah, I really like this level, and the best part is it's not over as soon as we leave Jimmy's house. We get to explore the outside of Jimmy's house too, his lawn. And I know it may seem very strange to be so excited about exploring Jimmy's lawn, but I really like Jimmy Neutron. And I think the really cute aesthetic of Jimmy's hometown translates super well to a video game. It's very much a shame that the movie game for you know, the original Jimmy Neutron, the Jimmy Neutron film. It's a shame the Jimmy Neutron movie games did not do the town justice. I have no doubt that they tried, but if this game had budget constraints, then the Jimmy Neutron games that came out for the movie had way more tight budget constraints. That or technology really advanced that much over the years, it's hard to say. Because this is a much more competent 3D rendering of Retroville than the Jimmy Neutron movie game on the consoles or on PC. Now, granted, the PC game did try to be an open world game, and considering it was a low-budget license title, that may have not been a good choice. I don't know if it's fair to call it ambitious, but I do think having an open world game, of all things where you explore Retroville, is a very good idea. But now that Jimmy Neutron's been cancelled for quite some time, I don't think that's ever going to happen again. Unlike many of the other Nicktoons shows, the layout for Retroville is fairly consistent, so it would be much easier to translate to an open world than SpongeBob or Danny or, you know, Dimsdale. I think you could say there's a focus on pathfinding in Jimmy's yard, because you have to figure out how to get over the shrubs into the backyard so that way you can get the last of the collectibles. One might figure that Jimmy could just leave through the back door, but there doesn't appear to be a back door. So I can only assume he has to platform over these shrubs every time. Nevertheless, because the environments are so small, and I think I already said this, because the environments are so small and distinct, the pathfinding is very easy. And that's not a bad thing. The environments are very nice to look at in this video game. Even though this game is a bit short for a full console release, I still think that most children would be much more satisfied with the environmental variety and platforming in this game than what we actually received in Nicktoons Unite for consoles. Nicktoons Unite for consoles has a lot more love and respect in its story than this game does, because this game's story is a mess. But the gameplay and environments in this game are far better. And if I had to pick one, I would choose the gameplay and environments over the better story. After we finish this minigame, we will be done with this level. And we can move on to the downtown area of Retroville, which will be nice. We'll get to see the candy bar and everything. I love the candy bar. It's a really good pun, and the building is very distinctive. It's a very nice looking building. It's just a nice place in general. Here we are, downtown. Downtown looks a lot like a diorama, but that's okay. This is on the Nintendo DS. So, I've seen a few people get stuck here, those that made it this far. And the idea here is just to defeat all of the robots, and then you can enter the mall. But to be fair, the game doesn't really make this clear. When I first played the game, I didn't get stuck here. I just assumed it was the case that I needed to defeat all of the enemies before I could enter the mall. I just assumed that was the case because the camera pans all over downtown and shows you the location of the enemies like you're supposed to defeat them all, so I just did that. Unlike back at Danny's school, when we had to defeat all the enemies, this time there's a little more going on. We still have to defeat all the enemies, but some of them are on rooftops. So there's a bit of pathfinding as well. It's not quite as dull as it was back at Danny's school. I guess there was a slight bit of platforming at Danny's school too, but it wasn't as interesting as this. The turrets, by the way, can actually be kind of hard unless you come up on them from behind like I'm doing here. Because they kinda annihilated me the first time I played this level. Oh, I forgot Attack of the Twonkies was a thing. I wonder if that game maps out Retroville well. Because I know Jet Fusion doesn't do a good job of that, but I wonder if Attack of the Twonkies does. I know Attack of the Twonkies has really good game mechanics in place for Jimmy's spontaneous inventions, and I was impressed by that. But I never did look into whether they mapped out Retroville very well. I did try to play Jet Fusion once, and I kind of wanted to share it on the channel, but it was much too difficult to be enjoyable for me. That may sound weird, but it is a very, very tough video game. I think we're done now. I think we got them all. Hooray for pathing! Some of my Let's Plays feel more like casual speedruns. Okay, so we're going to want to switch to Timmy, because this door will open after we press a button, and the only way to get through the door quickly enough is with Timmy, because the timer starts. Gotta get way up in there. There we go. All the other characters are a bit too slow for that. I wonder why Timmy's thing is being fast. I very much enjoy the pathfinding inside of the mall, but even though I haven't played a lot of old PC games, I have played enough to know how to break pathfinding in certain situations. So I figured out that we could do this. Hold on. There we go. I figured out that we could do this to skip a substantial chunk of... To skip... Give me a minute. Just give me a minute. Hold on. I got it earlier. I can do it again. Let me just use the trash can instead. I figured out that we could... Yeah, this. I figured out we could do this to skip a substantial chunk of the level. And that skip went much, much better during my practice run than it did here. We're using Jimmy's shrink ray for combat, which is not advisable, and the only reason we're doing that is because you're never really going to get to see it. I don't think we have seen it except for in the very first level. It's not ideal. It's not an ideal weapon. but that's because Jimmy's thing is jumping. He's our jump man. SpongeBob's thing is existing. That's his gimmick. We're nearly done with the mall now. The mall layout is very strange, but maybe we can chalk that up to Professor Calamitous. Maybe he did this to the mall. Or maybe Jimmy just lives in a crazy town. Who knows? The mall is a fun area either way. And now, if I remember correctly, yep, it's candy bar time. It's kind of weird how we skip straight to the inside of the candy bar. Because the candy bar is not inside the mall. It's very much its own building. It's at the hub of the downtown area. But maybe they just couldn't figure out how to... or they didn't have time to model the outside of the candy bar. We'll see the outside of the candy bar in another Nicktoons game, though, so don't worry too much about that. But either way, we're in the candy bar now, and after we defeat everything, we'll go rescue Goddard. There is only one level left after this one, and sadly, I don't like that level very much. Which is a shame because in concept, it's a very nice idea. But it's just mostly combat, and even though the environments look nice, it gets very tiring, very quickly. I do think the final boss makes up for it, though. I very much like the final boss. We're not done fighting the bots here, there are more on this upper floor. I'm not very sure why we need to defeat all the robots before we repair Goddard. That seems very strange to me, considering the robots don't seem to be doing anything. But it's not hard to take them out either. Maybe the game expected you to actually go over there where they are, but all the characters have projectile attacks besides Timmy, so that's not necessary. Also, why is Goddard in the candy bar of all places? Hey, we know this minigame. We've done this minigame plenty of times. Jimmy was very right when he said Retroland is a big place. This is a very, very long level in comparison to every other level in the game. And I understand it is the final level, but there is a whole lot of eradicating enemies, and it's just so long. The platforming isn't anything we haven't seen done better in previous levels in this world even. And even though the scenery is very, very nice, it would have been much more preferable if I didn't have to go through a hedge maze in order to get to the inside of the roller coaster section with a bunch of respawning robots. You see how many of them are respawning? This is at 6 times speed. Part of me does feel bad that I can't appreciate this level as well as the others. And I understand they wanted to make a suitable final location, but there's just too much hitting enemies. There's just too much of that. The hedge maze has gates in it too that need to be opened with minigames, so you can't just solve the maze. You also have to defeat all the enemies before you can even enter the inside of the roller coaster. So not only do you have to do a bunch of minigames to solve the maze, but you have to meticulously search the maze for every last enemy. The inside of the roller coaster right here is cute. It's got an under construction vibe going on. It's not as crazy as the actual ride in the television show, and we still have to destroy a bunch of enemies for seemingly no reason. Being on the inside of the roller coaster, though, means that we're near the end of the level. Some very minor pathfinding and hazard evasion in here. Stuff we've already seen in earlier levels, though maybe slightly more difficult. But I really just want to get to the final boss, because I like that a lot more than anything in this level. The final boss's design is a very simplistic platforming gauntlet, but the design is very nice. It explores the platforming mechanics as well as can be expected for a game like this, and I think it's worth it. So here we are back at normal speed at the final boss, and the idea for the final boss is just to race Calamitous to the top of this giant metallic structure. And it's really fun. In addition to us having to actually move fast, because Calamitous does ascend rather quickly, the platforming itself is challenging. There are moving platforms, it's very easy to fall down, and Professor Calamitous will be firing bolts at us the entire time we're climbing. It's a very surreal atmosphere. The platforming challenge is suitable for a final boss battle. There are some fun skips you can do assuming you're playing as Jimmy, which you should be if you actually want to reach the top in time. It's just a good time all around. It's very clear why they saved this for the final boss, because the platforming in this game isn't exactly depthful. Deep's the word. But they wanted to explore it, and they did a good job doing that with this final boss encounter. The platforming mechanics are limited, and the controls aren't the best, but it's well suited for this kind of thing, this kind of platforming gauntlet. You can see he's catching up. The moving platforms are the hardest part. The platforming gauntlet comes in two parts also, and this is the second part. This second part may seem much easier than the first at a first glance, but it's actually very much more difficult, mostly because of the moving platforms again. I have fallen down here many times, and it's usually because of my own recklessness, because I want to finish the boss quickly enough to not lose. But yeah, you could call this actually challenging, this entire final boss platforming gauntlet. I approve of this. This is a good exploration of the very limited mechanics they had to work with, and I'm proud of them for this. It's a shame they couldn't compose suitable final boss music. This music was used several other places throughout the game, and it's not really anything too special. After we reach the very top, we have to fight Calamitous, which basically just means shoot at him over and over until he leaves. It's not hard. But this isn't the real final boss. The real final boss was the platforming gauntlet. This is just us shooting Calamitous because we need to shoot Calamitous. But yeah, I quite like the final boss. It's pretty good. It's a good way to finish the game. Now we just have to make it to the four corners of this room and do all the mini-games in time in order to finish the game, and that'll be it. Thank you everyone for sticking around through this. I know it's probably not quite what you expected after Attack of the Toy Bots, which is the best Nicktoons game, but this is a second. It's not a close second, but I still think it's very good, and it's probably a much better indication of what kids actually want. If this had higher resolution textures and better skyboxes and buffed up character models, then this could have easily been a console game. It wouldn't have received good reviews because it is very short, but I think kids would have been much happier with this than the Nicktoons Unite we did get on consoles. Granted, this one doesn't have multiplayer, but playing multiplayer on the Nicktoons Unite for consoles is really just being bored with 2 people. This game isn't boring. Anyway, stick around for the very last Nicktoons game we're going to be playing, which isn't as good as the other 2, but is special in different ways.